Hello, I am your everyday average Jonathan. Join me this week as I turn this and this into these fantastical letter openers, or really we'll just call them daggers, which is what they are. Hello, I am your everyday average Jonathan. Thank you for joining me today. I'm an ordinary guy with ordinary tools making extraordinary items. This week, I will begin a project that's a commission for me to make 2 corporate gift letter openers. And really all this means is that I'm just going to be making essentially 2 daggers that will be used as letter openers by the recipients. I won't make them stupid sharp, but I will make them very avant-garde in design, like no letter openers that most of us has ever seen. Without further ado, let's get to the shop and get started. So I have an admission to make. I doodle in church sometimes. Each Sunday I take my 2 girls, pack them in the car, off to church we go. And during the sermons I listen fastidiously, but there are definitely times when I will doodle. And that piece of paper that you saw right there is one of the doodles from church this past Sunday. I wanted to make each of these daggers, letter openers, 13 inches long. 13, very superstitious number, goes back to the Knights Templar and what the Pope at the time decided to do to them and basically attack them on a Friday the 13th. And I'm sure there's some other circumstances where 13 is an unlucky number or just a superstitious number. What you see here is a lawnmower blade, and lawnmower blades, among other tool blades, are really great steel for making other things out of, other knives, other items out of that you need to be sharpened to hold an edge. So I took this lawnmower blade, and interestingly, as you'll see in a little bit here, on the blade was written Ryobi, which is a hand tool company out of, well, apparently they make lawnmowers too. You can get them out of Home Depot. I set off with the intention to make 2 individual letter openers, daggers, and in doing so I was going to make one at a time. I wasn't going to overlap, and the first one I really wanted it to have almost a what we would call a stiletto style blade, which is just an extremely long, very pointed, very sharp at one end blade. I wanted it to be monolithic, which means 1 piece of steel, 1 piece of iron. I ended up breaking it when I was trying to bend it, so instead I just went ahead and welded it back together. But I was going to give it some twist to give it some personality, and then the guard was going to be 1 part of the handle just split off, twisted, and then curled back on itself, which is what I'm doing here. It still is technically cold weather time here in northern Colorado. It is springtime, but check out how fast this red hot metal cools. This is slightly sped up, but this cooled to basically back to gray color in a matter of under 30 seconds each one. It was still malleable, but I needed to reheat it several times. I'm very impressed by how quickly that cooled, and it honestly wasn't even that cold in my shop on this particular day. The design that I'm going for here is a handle and a guard that you can fit several fingers inside that are then protected by the guard, as well as a 3rd finger in rear of the first 2 that would also have its own form of protection, kind of like a basket hilt, if you will, or maybe even something that looks more like a rapier. And this is what happens when you melt your tripod. I was using my acetylene torch and I thought my tripod was completely metal, but apparently there are some plastic attachment sites that I just melted the entire thing and it fell over. Tack welding the handle back onto the guard itself, and then I will start to begin the blade. And if you can look really closely here, the writing says Ryobi where I'm pointing, and on the other side it says grass side. So you know you're dealing with a lawnmower blade. This to me is a design aesthetic that I chose to do, which I'm kind of intrigued by, and that is I didn't want the handle and the blade to follow in the same plane. I wanted the blade to be slightly offset, maybe at a downward angle, than the handle is, just so ever so slightly. There's something about the geometry to it and the way that it looks to the eye that makes it look maybe just a little bit more sinister. I'm not certain if you will think the same once I get this finished, but I'd love to know. As I often say, my welding is purely circumstantial at best, that it actually even works and sets up. Always involves a lot of grinding, a lot of polishing to get it to look like I intended it to look that way. But it's just part of my process, and now I'm going to go ahead and start sharpening this blade. I need to come up with and look at jigs that will allow me different angles to approach this belt sander that doesn't have a platform or a table, and set specific angles that I want into each edge. But right now, honestly, I'm just eyeballing it. And being that it's going to be a letter opener, dagger, it's going to not need to be very sharp, and I don't want it to actually be sharp. The point of this particular blade is extremely sharp. So much so that I was worried that when I give it to somebody, they're just going to inadvertently plant it in their leg or in other parts of their body without wanting to. Now what I'm doing is something that is a bit of a staple for me, or maybe even a calling card, which is getting this item entirely red hot, wrapping it with a little thin copper cord, throwing some borax flux on it, dumping it back into the forge, getting it red hot until the copper melts into the steel. The only real significant downside to doing this on this particular device and a few others that I've made is that the copper pools, and it actually pools into the touch mark that I've put into my initials, which is my touch mark. The copper basically pools straight into them, covering them completely up. So no one will ever know that I actually made this but for this amazing video. And in the past, as I've said before, when you see somebody who is dipping a red hot piece of metal into a bucket of hot oil, you have seen and are witnessing the highest form of intelligence known to man. So here it is in all its glory. I really like the way this came out. I like the way it feels in the hand. I like the look of it and the questions that it asks of the viewer. The point at the end of the handle is not stupid sharp, but it's certainly sharp enough that you could embed it into a piece of wood anytime. Now, on to the second dagger letter opener. This is going to be a completely different design. I'm going to use the same basic, the same lawnmower blade for the metal portion of the blade, but I wanted to do something that had wood involved. Not a wood inlay, but a little bit of a balanced, sort of curvy, flowy look to it that has some wood. I tried a little while ago to make these wands for my girls, and I tried to do it on a lathe, and I failed miserably. But the glue up of the wood, this is tiger maple and holly, and that's the actual color of the tiger maple. That deep beet looking purple, that is the actual color. And the holly, for those of you that don't know, Hollywood is very opaque and about as close to pure white wood that I've ever seen. They make for a great juxtaposition. So I was going to use these as two halves of the handle that I was making. The intention is to trace this onto this piece of wood, this first hemisphere, and then route out the indentation that the handle is going to take on each half, and then epoxy them together. Also, I was going to have the metal protrude out of the handle on both sides where the blade is, but also on essentially the pommel side. And what I was going to do was make just, I guess what you would call a curly Q on the bottom of the handle, giving it a little bit of decor. This is something that every blacksmith should just be able to do in their sleep, and I don't do this very often, and I just, the more I practiced it and looked at it, the more I'm like, man, I should be able to do this quite fast. But it took a little bit of doing, but I'm happy to do it. Now I just cut the blade out. I'm going to profile it a little bit better on the grinding wheel, get it to where I want it to be. Again, with the other letter opener dagger that I made, I don't want it to be stupid sharp. I want it to be sharp enough to be able to get under the lip of an envelope. The point will be decently sharp, but everything else is going to be fairly dull. I'm just flattening each side of this piece of metal because it's going to sit within a piece of wood, and I wanted it to be very uniform so that the epoxy can touch as much of the metal and the wood at the same time. And now I'm going to go ahead and rewrap this particular blade and stick it back in the forge and do my copper impregnation trick. Again, this is kind of a calling card for me. I do like the way it looks. It's a bit unique. It's just something that sort of sets the knife apart and also gives it an arcane look that I really like. Pulling it straight out of the oil, it's always neat to look at it and say, okay, what will this look like once I get the grinding wheels on it and the wire wheels on it and polish it up? Doing this often makes me pucker. When I use a router in this small of a form factor situation, there's all sorts of things that I feel like I can do wrong. I tell myself constantly to slow down, and I can need to even heed that more and continue to slow down. No matter how much routing is done on the little corners, always need a chisel. I'm not a very good chiseler, but I try. And as I said on the previous blade, the copper that I impregnated just filled up the touch mark almost completely. As you can see here, there was a touch mark there, and it's just filled up completely with copper. But be that as it may, it still looks pretty cool, I think. I'm not a good enough blacksmith to make the handle and the blade of this particular and the one before it knives monolithic one piece. I'm just not good enough yet. So it works out better for me to make them in two halves and then weld them together. Now, this is the first attempt with this piece of wood on the handle. When I brought it back after gluing it together and setting it up and leaving it sit overnight, it did not work out too well, which you'll see here in a little bit. I had to redo it. But first things first, my friend Zach, who commissioned this, asked that I make some leather scabbards. I protested because I'm lazy and I didn't really want to make a leather scabbard, but it really made sense to, because these things, you want them protected. Yeah, you want them to be something that someone can pull out quickly, which these scabbards or sheaths do. But more importantly, with this particular first knife that has an extremely sharp point to it, you do want that protected. Somebody could just pick it up and inadvertently place it into their body somehow, and that gives me it keeps me up at night. I use the snap rivets for most of them, but there's one solid copper rivet that I used on that to give it something that the blade will actually run into that is more solid than those snap rivets. Now, this is the next morning coming back, taking a look at the glue up, and when I made the wand blanks that you're seeing here, I actually pre-drilled these holes through them because I thought I was going to run some electrical wires through there. And so then once I cut these down, that hole that I pre-drilled through it, you can see it there. It came out. So I tried a few times and then I just said, you know what, we're going to redo this completely. So I actually took the whole thing off and started over with different pieces of old wand wood. I really don't like using a Dremel. I'm telling you, me and the Dremel, it's an exercise in futility. I dislike it. So I went back to using a little sanding flap wheel. That didn't work. Come over to my little spindle sander. This thing is a POS, which stands for point of sale, for those of you who are following along. It's just not a great device. I just don't think I'll end up using it. I'll probably give it away to somebody. I'll tell you what isn't a POS, and it's that die grinder that I use with the sanding, that little flap wheel on it. It just does such a good job. It did everything I wanted it to do the first time with no issues. Now I'm going to make one more little leather sheath to capture this particular dagger. It's just going to be a slip-on and slip-off sheath, just something to give it a little bit of protection if it sits on someone's desk. You know, they're going to use it as a letter opener dagger. This black leather that you see here, it has got to be more than 40 years old. It's been with me since high school or before, so it needed a little bit of conditioning, a little bit of neat's foot oil, which is great for leather, especially old leather, rejuvenates it. And here they are. You'll have to forgive the green screen backdrop, but it is fun to put it up and mess with it and rotate these on a stump and get a chance to look at them in all sorts of dimensions. I think they turned out really good. I think that they're very cool conversation pieces. I think that they're going to cause a pause for anybody that comes by these people's desks and see them. I hope that the people receiving them, I hope that they use them, and I hope that they love them. Well, thank you for joining me. That was a really fun build. There really isn't a lot of learnings that I would take away from this build. One of the ones that I am exploring in my mind is how to apply copper onto a piece of steel, impregnate it into the steel like I've been doing, but have it be much more defined in where the copper is on the steel. Currently, the copper that I put on the steel just sort of pools and oozes into the steel in a large area, I have no real control over how it fits onto that particular piece of steel. I'm going to explore more of that. I'm going to look at ways that I can encapsulate or capture the copper in a very defined area. Another builder who has given me a lot of input is a guy named Justin from Hope Knives, and he has given me some ideas on something called copper my or CU my, which is another process, and it seems to be relatively new in the knife making field, so I will be trying that pretty soon. I have to say it is a real pleasure to make something that will end up being a gift for someone else, someone that I don't know, seeing their reception, hearing about their reception. It can be both a little bit intimidating, a little bit nerve-wracking, because I want them to like it, I want them to enjoy it, but at the same time, it's a real reward to be able to do that. Oh my gosh. Okay. Sometimes you just gotta let them finish. But other than that, that's really it for this build. Next week, I will begin to start another commission that I received to make a bird feeder, but not just any bird feeder, a bird feeder for, and I'll say this with air quotes because this is what I was told, large birds. A friend of mine who requested for this said that she has a lot of little bird feeders that accommodate the smaller to medium-sized birds, but there's nothing for the crows and ravens and magpies that come into our area to feed off of. So she's gonna be getting a Gothic bird feeder, and I'm a little concerned that there is no tree on this land that's gonna be strong enough to hold it when I'm done with it. But regardless, thank you for joining me. If you like builds like this that are interesting, that are imaginative, that are fantastical, please check out my channel for more fantastical builds. And until then, God bless. Have a great week.